Welcome to the AI and Advertising webinar. We have an exceptional group of panelists today representing different sectors of the industry, including consulting, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the discussion. I'm John Kaiser. I lead the Advertising and Marketing Services practice at Oaklins, DeSilva+Phillips. If you're not familiar with Oaklins, it's a leading mid-market investment bank with 60 offices in 40 countries. TMT is our most active M&A vertical, and Oaklins DeSilva+Phillips co-leads the TMT practice focused on media marketing and technology. Within TMT, AI has been a focus of ours for many years. We held an AI summit in 2019, and this will be our fourth webinar on AI. The previous one was on agentic AI. I'll start with a brief overview of AI, and then we'll move to the panel discussion. Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn and partner at VC firm Greylock, was prescient when he stated nearly 3 years ago that AI is going to reshape every industry and every job. Today, artificial intelligence is reshaping the advertising and marketing industry in ways more profound than anything we've seen before. It's not just a new technology. AI is a fundamental shift in how agencies create, target, and measure campaigns. AI is not new. It's been used in advertising since the 1990s, but today is quite different. The depth of first-party data, the sophistication of AI-powered analytics, the rise of powerful generative models, and AI's integration into major platforms have ushered in an AI revolution that impacts all aspects of the business, including, next, campaign optimization. AI is optimizing workflow, targeting, budget allocations, and measurement to drive more efficient and effective campaigns. Creative development and production. Generative AI is augmenting human creativity, enabling the exploration of concepts and development of ideas at unprecedented speed. It also allows agencies to produce ad variations tailored to different audiences at scale. And personalization. AI makes one-to-one marketing achievable. AI predicts preferences, optimizes messages, and then determines the perfect moment to engage individuals. AI is experiencing explosive growth. It's estimated that there are over 10,000 tools worldwide and 500 to 1,000 new AI companies are being launched each year. We're currently seeing a wave of task-specific tools. Some examples include content ideation, copy optimization, visual and video content, SEO. The market is growing, and the investment in AI is staggering. Global AI spending is projected to be $1.5 trillion this year, with big tech accounting for about $400 billion in infrastructure. Through October, venture capital firms have invested nearly $200 billion in AI startups, representing about half of all VC spending globally and 64% of VC investments in the United States. If you're a company looking for VC support and you're not AI, good luck. Investments ultimately lead to exits. There have been a considerable number of transactions recently, many focused on sectors or tasks, commerce, media buying, creative and ad optimization, and influencer marketing. What I find particularly noteworthy is that I think AI transaction activity is setting new records for the shortest time frame from launch to exit. It's extraordinary, as well as the valuations. In terms of AI adoption, the large agency networks have leaned into AI, and through acquisitions, partnerships, and integration, developed internal AI platforms. 80 to 90% of the larger agencies are currently using generative AI. Despite the many benefits of AI for advertising and marketing agencies, there are challenges to be considered. Trust and transparency. AI content and targeting must align with brand values. Missteps have happened and they can be costly. Agency workflows, existing processes need rethinking, particularly with agentic AI, and agency personnel should be AI fluent. And finally, client relationships. Many clients have in-house agencies and internal AI platforms. AI represents a threat to agencies as well as an opportunity. As an opportunity, over 90% of marketers report using AI, while 40 to 50% admit that they don't know how to extract maximum value from it. With that as background, I'll turn it over to John Matthews, who will be moderating the session. John is a specialist in AI, having worked in technology and AI for many years before joining Oaklins, DeSilva+Phillips. One final housekeeping note, we are going to take questions at the end, so if you have any, please submit them through the Q&A button. John?
Thanks very much for that, John. There's a lot of Johns here. So I'd like to sort of dive into our panel, and maybe we can start. I think it's going to be a great panel. I'm really excited about this, and given what Katie, Emma, Quentin, and Emily have been doing, and Quentin, I think there's going to be some really interesting insights here. But first, can we maybe start with a round of introductions? If you could each introduce yourself, and in doing so, say a little bit about what your organizations are doing with AI, where you are, a little bit about where you're going, briefly some lessons learned, and your own sort of, just to finish off with your own opinion on how you're seeing what we're seeing happening in this whole area. And maybe Quentin, from the McKinsey perspective, you can also add something about any of the clients that you've worked with, anything from recent studies and work in the MediaX business that you work within and lead at McKinsey. So maybe we start off with Emily and go from there.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, at least if you're coming in East Coast. And really pleased to be here. Thanks for having me. I work at Huge. Huge is a design and technology company and lead AI strategy there across our global client base. Your question, John, is wild because what isn't AI is sort of where we are right now. It's in our conversations, it's in our workflows, it's in our tools, of course. It's in our answers, right? It's in our solutions as well, meaning that we're really putting AI not just into the marketer's hands, but in some cases even into our end consumers' hands, which is, I think, where I get the most excited. There's been so much transition in the last year from, I'd say, hesitancy to kind of not quite default expectation, but a bit more embracing, I would say, in the last year coming from our clients. We have a few still that refuse to use it, and we then have to follow suit. That's really important. But we're seeing just a ton of clients that understand this is really requires experimentation. And we do that across the board. You know, Huge is really focused on intelligent experiences is what we talk about a lot. So it's the idea that we are really using the latest technology, but especially generative AI, to bring intelligence into everything we do. And a great example of that is the AI search experience we did for the Olympics last year, where people could find the exact precise bit of information that they needed to in order to get to the programming for the Olympics that they most loved. When you think about 7,000 hours of content, how am I going to find my best thing? And what I love about that use case is that it's meaningful. It isn't simply like, oh, this would be fun if someone could kind of generate something silly, you know. Instead, this was really servicing true need, which excites me most. John, you piled on a lot of pieces. I tried to kind of hit a couple of them, but I'll pass it on to others to continue.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back to some of those later.
Yeah.
Emma, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Cookson. I'm a partner at the Brandtech group. Relevant to this, we're a relatively new organization, 10 years old. Relative to this discussion, I believe we're probably the #1 Gen AI marketing company. Our ambition is to remain that way. We've been focused on this capability since day one. At the heart of the group is our own proprietary Gen AI platform, which is Pencil. It aggregates all the leading foundational models relevant to marketers, and we deploy that platform and provide, where necessary, the service elements to scale it. And we're thus scaling generative AI application and deployment for a lot of big global companies. For example, Google's own marketing teams for their own marketing use Pencil. other key clients, Unilever, Diageo, NatWest, L'Oreal, many others. So again, so it's a very exciting conversation to have with you all, because it's essentially my lived experience every day to talk about how this works and where the challenges are. I should pass to the next folks, I think.
Yeah. Katie?
Hey,
I'm doing this
Katie
the order you're
Comerford.
on my screen, so you're next, Katie.
No worries. I'm Katie Comerford. I'm at Horizon Media. My role is Chief of Strategy and Operations, which is one of those titles that people are like, what does that mean? But the good thing is it is kind of on the backbone of AI being powering everything that we're doing and the pivots that we're making, taking data first strategy and empowering everyone within the company to have that access and speed to insight using AI, and kind of shifting the way that we're thinking about for our clients, how we're talking to and thinking about our audiences and what we know about them. Additionally, on the operations side, it's more about how do we bring these solutions to place to empower people to think more broadly and take away those monotonous tasks that sometimes take up too much time. So trying to shift that organizational mindset. What's been exciting recently with Horizon is we are a media agency. We're an independent shop, and we're shifting from being just a media agency to having that product kind of in our back pocket to be able to bring those solutions, AI forward solutions, to our clients. And one of those is Blue, our connected marketing platform. And we've been partnering with a lot of different AI firms to bring tools and tech, Pencil being one of those. Emma, so good to see you. But it's been exciting in the past 5 years, but I feel like the past 6 months has felt gas powered into what we're doing with AI.
Quentin?
Hey everybody, I'm Quentin George. Thanks John and company for having me. I co-lead the media and advertising practice for McKinsey. I've only been with the firm for 6 years, and prior to that, I grew up in this industry. First with creative and digital agencies, and then as a digital transformation executive at one of the agency holding companies. And so I've seen this transformation live and in person, as they say. Look, next year McKinsey celebrates our 100th year, and the firm was founded on the principle of helping companies navigate times of disruptive change. And I would say in that 100 years, we've seen a lot of change, a lot of disruptive technologies, but I think in many aspects we are underestimating in the short term how AI is going to transform not just the advertising business, but every aspect of business, and underestimate in the long term what it's capable of doing. Look, we advise companies across the entire advertising and marketing value chain, and one of the things that we really focus on is, it's fine to have these interesting consumer-based demos that make for good slideware and comparisons. But for us, the real work and the real excitement and real business value was way down in the bowels of an agency, or in the bowels of an organization, with things like billing and reconciliation and forecasting and utility and utilization and resource management. And I think not a lot of folks really understand the potential for disruption, but the true potential for business value. And we've seen some of that manifest in just the last 6 months. And so I'd encourage us, as we have these conversations about the impact of AI, to really imagine it through the entire life cycle of the agency and the holding company ecosystem, because it is going to be that profound. And so with that, I'll pass it back to you, John.
Actually, Quentin, I just want to go a little bit further, because there's been a lot of talk about what McKinsey themselves have been doing with AI and building, I think, I can't remember what the number is, but it's a large number of sort of AI agents in order to work with your clients. And your professional services organization, advertising agencies, marketing agents are also professional services. So I'm just wondering what, from your experience of what you've done at McKinsey, is transferable in terms of experience, insights, lessons learned to the other folks here and in general into the sort of marketing services ecosystem.
Well, look, I'll maybe talk in precise detail how it's affected me and how I've had to change my perspective. Look, the firm has made a number of these AI investments, starting probably 10, 15 years ago with the acquisition of Quantum Black. And look, when companies come to us for AI transformation, we have had to transform ourselves. In small and significant ways. I think there's a lot of talk around the tool sets, around the skill sets, around getting sharp, but it really does start with the mindset. And so one of the micro habits that I now have is I meet with a technical assistant once a week, and the conversation is a dialogue around the way that I approach my workflow and what the things are that can be done to help aid that. And so just in the past 3 months or so, we now have agents that read all my trade publications and produce a 15-minute podcast for me every day. So I don't have to go and read the headlines of every publication that I've subscribed to. There are agents that help me with preparing and collating documents for performance reviews. There are agents that we've written that help me with preparing all of the materials that I have for expense management. And so there's a range of those things, but it's more of a dialogue between my executive assistant, my TA, and myself, and their observed behavior of where I spend my time and how we can start to automate some of that workflow. Now, I'm excited because these are all single steps, but we're not to the point where we get real autonomous agents. But I can imagine in the conversations that we're having is I have clients, I know what their interests are, I know when their birthdays are, and so why is there not an agent that has a particular budget in mind that can anticipate that knows what the interests of my clients are, and then can go and buy a gift and send it on my behalf in a really kind of automated way. I don't know, maybe some people bristle. Maybe I should treat my clients more personally, but I'm just using that as a provocative notion that you can, of the spectrum of things that one can do to be able to do that. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I think it in addition to all of the training and immersion and all of those things, I think it requires a bit of a mindset change in terms of thinking about how you can now go and optimize workflow in meaningful ways. We now start studies where we have a calendaring agent that is as if they're a team member. There's agents that help us with ideas for structured fun. There's agents that help synthesize note-taking and things like that. And so I think there's a whole range of those utilities and tools that we're going to have to work through to figure out ways to be more productive and efficient.
That was great. Thanks very much for that, Quentin. I mean, maybe if I can sort of switch over to Katie here, and if you can talk a little bit about Horizon and what you've been doing in terms of the Blue program. I heard one of your colleagues talk about this the other week at Ad Week or Advertising Week. And you've done a lot of work in terms of that mindset, I think, in terms of getting the majority of your employees on board with AI and so on. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that, and then if Emily and Emma can sort of chime in after that on what their organizations have been doing in a similar way.
Yeah, absolutely. So Blue is our connected marketing platform that basically is the foundation of our entire process. So it starts with mining both the open web and then in our internal thought leadership, clients' information briefing, creative documents, earning call documents, and synthesizes that to create an ecosystem that's unique to each client that allows us to understand their business situation. We ingest their first-party data and basically map those audiences that allows us to do really interesting things of understanding propensity, incrementality, churn, if it's a subscription model client, and then start to create a media strategy that's actually people first. I know we've been talking about people first for so long, but this is a deterministic way to get there. And so it really does take media tied directly to business results more so than ever in the past, where then media, what was the contribution to business results? This really sets the two at the same level. We are looking at ways that we can identify, one fun one is SafeLight. Love that client. Everybody's probably singing the jingle. It's Belron globally, but we can't predict, there's no data that says somebody has a cracked windshield. But we know that their year, make, model of the car that the person owns just dictates the revenue of the appointment. So when you have a business that has capacity challenges because technicians have to service these vehicles, and you have a pipeline to find the right vehicles, we want to make sure we're piping the right revenue vehicles in, and then helping them understand their capacity at the market level and the challenges that's serving to capturing the demand. So it's been really awesome, because like normally I'm a media person, I'm coming at you with spots and dots and how do I solve these challenges, and now I'm a business partner. And so it's been really fun to watch our teams here at Horizon start to think like an extension of the internal marketing team, more so than, great, let me go call my vendors and figure out how to get you in the Super Bowl. It just becomes more of a robust conversation, which has been really exciting. And then the evolution of that is kind of, what are the tech and tools that we can bring in? We did a RFI out to the industry. So, the list that John showed earlier, all those partners, what can they do to help sit on top of our platform and bring their tech solutions in that changes the game, brings all our client data, houses it in, but then does dynamic creative solutions, personalization at scale. So really the things that we've talked about for a long time, it allows all those things to come together, and it's at the service of our clients. So it's been really exciting. And we've been training our clients to be in platform using an LLM model that just basically democratizes access to the data at all touch points. So it's been cool. The prompt training was one of my favorites that I went through, of like, how do you actually ask the questions in the right way, which is something I don't think a lot of us think about with AI, but it was just great for everybody to see, like, there's a better way to converse here. So communication with robots 101.
So Emma, maybe you could talk a little bit about Pencil and what led Brandtech to sort of decide to go that direction in terms of a product that you're going to put into clients' hands, and where you go next with that.
Yeah, we're confident, as has been said a couple of times, that this is a completely holistic disruption of all aspects of marketing and advertising. That said, the first and biggest scale marketing applications of generative AI particularly do seem to be in the content creation and content optimization space. And what Pencil is it's a platform that's been in existence since 2018. I joke that that is prehistoric times in the world of generative AI. But essentially it was built originally on GPT-2, I think, to use the power of generative AI to create assets, effectively initially social ads, and now, of course, everything, social ads, e-commerce assets, email, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're doing essentially is scaling that capability for all our clients. And it's interesting that the quantifiable efficiency benefits are quite extraordinary. But actually, what's going to get more and more interesting is the effectiveness improvements that are going to come along the way, I think. So I always quite like first quarter of this year, just for 3 big clients, I won't name them, we generated nearly 240,000 assets that went live in market. And we did so over 60% cheaper, 55% faster, 40% better in market performance. The metrics of that varied. So it's really quantifiable, really fast, the effectiveness gains. And that, of course, is compelling to clients, compelling to our clients. But what's interesting is the more you sort of almost like bag those benefits, then, of course, what's actually happening is that because of the way you can analyze data and you can bring that together at an asset level, you can actually start to see equally, and I think long-term, potentially more effectiveness in market outcome and performance benefits. So what we're focused on, John, to try to be a bit more succinct in answering your question, we're focusing on scaling for clients the ability to capture the full benefits of generative AI, which go well beyond, of course, content creation and optimization. But in our experience, most of these big companies, that's what they want to capture most immediately and at a bigger scale. But yes, it was interesting. We could have another conversation, obviously,
Right.
talking with Horizon about, we just built out our agentic media platform. So we're certainly seeing extraordinary efficiencies in the way we activate and plan all our digital campaigns, which is primarily agentic now. So yeah, it's everywhere, but that's where we're seeing the biggest market appetite, the biggest client appetite.
Maybe we can come back to agentic AI in a little
for
while,
sure,
because
for
that's
sure. I think it's
exciting new
impossible to
area.
talk about AI without talking about agent these days.
So Emily, I think you said earlier AI is everything. So the question I posed at the start covered many different areas. So from Hugh's perspective, what has been the impact AI is having on Huge as an organization, the skills, the people there, the relationship with your clients, and how do you see that sort of going forward? And are you doing anything similar to Horizon and Brandtech in sort of building some technology yourselves to put in front of clients that then become an integral part of who you are as an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Where to begin? It's still, there's so many initiatives and sides to this. We got really lucky when ChatGPT kind of went public. We'd already spent 3 years deeply investing in a data platform. Our data platform is really focused both on scraping the web. We can also house the first party data as needed for our individual clients. But a big part of what we're looking at, we call it live. We were looking at how we can think about journeys in entirely new ways. And so we do a lot of work where we're actually trying to connect the external data of behavior and belief systems and triggers to try to understand how our clients' brands are being understood in real time, and then converting that into what we call intelligent twins. So how do we actually recognize not just the sort of Katie kind of referenced it a little bit. We've always wanted personalization, the story for the person to be really kind of that human people-centered side, but it was often based off of really blunt objects of segments and trying to understand these kind of generalizations. And so what we've been doing with our live platform is helping our clients understand much more specifically the journeys of these groups and the kind of micro journeys that go along with it. And then generating, like turning, the hardest part with data is it's so technical that it doesn't always actually communicate well. And so a lot of our work in live is actually translating that now, generating the story of the journey so that everyone in the marketing org can understand it better, so that it isn't just the sort of statistical underpinnings that exist there, but also to get real. So we worked with a retailer. They were very interested in boomers and trying to understand, because they are the sort of tried and true, but they felt like they were losing ground. And so they said, how do we make sure, and they actually serve everyone, I mean, almost from birth to death. But in this case, they were losing ground, and they said, okay, well, what's happening? And we were able to replicate the journey and talk about it in terms of, hey, that moment when it's out of stock on the site, they don't have a way to do something next. Now that's true for all of their audiences, but for the boomers, that was a major barrier. And so we were able to actually in a much richer way simulate and analyze, what really is happening for these different groups, and then actually even understand the subsets. I don't think we should be talking in broad strokes generations any longer when we talk about how do we reach people. And so that also helped them kind of move away from some of their almost assumptions that were coming with these sort of generational divides that they were bringing to the table. So it enriched their segments, broke down some bad habits, and then we are now starting to talk about, geo is a big topic in the world right now, generative engine optimization. How do I get it to say what I want it to say when I can't spend money on that problem, right? And so we're also thinking a lot about, we work with a lot of partner tools that are also running simulations, trying to understand what these LLMs are saying and doing. If we can integrate that better into our live system, right? The insights around the actual true behaviors and queries and conversations that happen in the world, because we're moving away from a world where we can be jargony to our customers and we can talk how we want to talk. We're actually having to be very people first and understanding how are they asking that question, because the LLM is going to serve them. And so understanding better their language and their needs. And so it's a complicated topic, but plugging all of that data in together so that we can actually have influence in spaces that is in many ways a black box still. I think that's the next, it's an active challenge, but I think it's a big one that's yet to be solved.
So thanks very much for that, Emily. Well, one of the things you mentioned there is about how you'd already been working on your data platform, for 3 years prior to that. And, I think a question that's going to be interesting for the audience is about being ready for all this. And, how much was already in place, although you may not have even seen ChatGPT coming down the line when it dropped in 2022 or the end of 2022, but just how much you felt you already had in place that really gave you the leg up on being able to do what you're doing now with AI, and how you feel for other organizations where they need to be to really take advantage and move quickly on this. And maybe also, Quentin, could you sort of comment, from your client work and so on, how you're seeing things and the differences between organizations. And I think also Emily mentioned earlier about just some clients are just not maybe getting it yet or ready for it yet, and others are. So how it's also that, again, coming back to that client relationship, what you're seeing on that side of things.
Was that to me, John, or to Quentin?
Well, I think actually just generally across, I think in a sense you sort of started the ball rolling, talking about the 3 years.
I mean, I could
data platform, but I think if maybe to Emma and Katie and then Quentin from his perspective, you can just talk about that sort of AI, let's call it AI readiness. Situation.
I mean, I can give one quick anecdote, which is I have a bit of an allergy to anyone claiming future proofing. I think that's a bit foolish. When I think about proofing, baby proofing, waterproofing, you're keeping babies out, you're keeping water out. You cannot keep the future out. I'm sorry to break it to everyone. That's not going to work. And so I think when we say future proofing, we're selling dreams and nonsense. What we actually need to do, and the best organizations are the ones that actually have a working muscle for changing all the time. That's actually what we need. And I think what's lucky is, as an organization at Huge, we have always been hungry. We've always been changing. And so that muscle is now super activated, I'd say. We're constantly kind of willing to flex, willing to adjust and evolve. But that from a readiness perspective, that's actually the metric we should be looking at. Are we ready to make a new decision 6 months from now? We're talking about, which enterprise, everyone's got their enterprise instance of an LLM access point, and don't fall asleep on that decision. I mean, I think we're actually starting to shift, starting to bring in a second one, realizing that some are, there's just so much richness in all these things. And so, again, just be willing to change, and that's going to be incredibly important.
I think you sort of touched on 2 points. One is the technology readiness in terms of the data and infrastructure, but the other, and perhaps more important, is that sort of cultural readiness.
Yeah.
That you've got that mindset, and you mentioned this also, Quentin, and it's very much a sort of a mindset where change perhaps becomes the norm.
Yeah, I'll tell the story. I'll tell the story in reverse by saying that if you look at this and think of this, that you need to manage transformation on three different fronts. The first is tool set, right? What are the investments that you're making? How are you deciding what types of LLMs? How are you going to create custom versions of those LLMs? How are you going to create flexibility in those types of environments to be able to continue to be successful? The second one is then the skill set. How do you then create a burning platform for change inside of the organization and make that cultural shift? I think it's similar in the early days of digital within agencies. It's similar in the transition that we made to search. It's similar to the transition we made to social, and now to commerce media, and whatever will be next. Is what are the new capabilities that you need to require, and how are you going to adjust and reevaluate your processes to be able to adapt? And then the last one is around this mindset and this broader cultural change. And we've certainly seen the ambitions of a couple of organizations be raised because they are willing to start to look at not just workflow change, but workflow orchestration, human labor orchestration. Should humans be doing some of these tasks to begin with? And so once you start to have that level of depth in terms of looking at your processes, that is a far cry from an open innovation. Everybody come forward with a great AI idea, and the chairman sits there and gladiator style decides which ones to fund or not. That is not what we're talking about. This is far more of an ingrained and cultural shift, and it takes incredible discipline. And so with that in mind, we actually don't encourage people to do the let 1,000 flowers bloom. We really go after and lock people up in a room in the most intractable, most hardcore, labor-intensive. You just don't understand the specialty of this craft and this business. It's like, yes, let's have a look at that. And the quality of time that we spend in that is incredibly valuable, because not only does it now start to look at where AI can be helpful, but it really starts to ask fundamental questions around whether we should be in that business, whether there is a business model that's going to sustain this world that we're going into, and what it is that we need to be able to change to adapt. And so those are fundamental and strategic conversations that I think most organizations, can very glibly avoid by saying, oh yeah, we've hired Susie or Johnny, and they are our head of AI, and they are going to run a bunch of experiments. We're going to all feel better about it. This is going to require far more of a fundamental mindset change. So I don't know if others are seeing that.
Well, I think maybe this helps introduce what we said we'd come back to, and it is the topic of the year, which is agentic AI or AI agents, however you want to sort of put it. And some will say there's some differences in that. I think, Emma, you talked about your Brandtech starting work on an agentic AI planning, media planning tool. And there's a lot of discussion in the market of the points that Quentin mentioned about this sort of where you bring sort of AI agents into the workforce alongside people in that sort of balance of who does what and managing that hybrid. So I'm just curious on your thoughts, what you're doing on this, and where you see that going in the year ahead. Is this a very sort of new thing to be thinking about and doing at the moment? Maybe Emma, you could start off on what you're doing at Brandtech on the media planning side there.
Yeah, sure. Before I do that, I would say I thoroughly agree with that 3-point readiness agenda that Quentin just outlined. And I would say on the tech readiness front, it's just critical not to be locked into one provider, because nobody can place the bets right in this space. So the readiness has to include openness to that. And on skill set, the answer is constant training. Training programs can't, you just have to have constant and multidimensional training. Should be a part of every organization's plans now. But the third part, as everyone's saying, is the attitude, because the training cannot keep pace with the change. So it doesn't matter how good or how much, the attitude we have seen time and time again, we now recruit in all our dimensions for capabilities and for attitude. and attitude, specifically self-teaching, self-learning, curiosity, leaning in, is a better indicator of performance in an AI world than actually established capabilities. So I really do agree with that. To agents, yeah, everything that we think we can do with Gen AI today, I would say will be done partially or majority with agents. So it's just everything again. I referred to Pencil, our AI platform. It has been completely rebuilt to be agentic across all its workflows, for example, over the last 2 months. So if you are on that interface now, you are now, the user experience is now starts with a set of agents that you might want to use and or the ability to build or import your own agents. So yes, when it comes to optimization of the whole media workflow, I was just saying in answer to a written Q&A, was essentially, I mean, it's the same with any agentic solution. You have to know the current workflow inside out, and then you build agents for each stage of it to essentially replicate what is done in automated format. And, in media, crudely speaking, we think that's like planning, then, building and the actual plans, trafficking, and measuring and optimizing. So it's essentially a chain of agents that does each of those, and you do personalize that. But again, everyone will say the same. And then if you're doing the strategy side, there are lots of different workflows you do for strategy, and you need different agents for those. If you're doing the content creation, you need different agents for different forms of content creation, etc., etc. And as I say, it's very important those agents become like expert members of your team, who then need to be shared with other users, constantly optimized, etc., etc. So I'm not sure, maybe I've gone a little bit off piste here, but to me, it's like one of those very, very broad questions, because agentic is going to just be what AI is. It is going to be how it works, I think.
Are you doing, in terms of your approach to agentic AI, is it somewhat with a particular group or building the agents, or are you more democratizing it where everyone can sort of build their own agents?
Well, this is the delight, of course, about agent building, that you need a domain expertise, but of course you build by essentially giving instructions in natural human language, and then obviously an agent builder creates for you. That said, we are finding that it helps to have a partnering of a domain expert with, there is a skill set still that makes it quicker and more effective to get to good solutions. So we are doing a bit of a duality. Yes, we do have a core central team who help across it. But again, I've heard folks say, yeah, like lots of folks build quite simple, but really quite useful agents. And we'll all.
I think we may have lost Emma. I think everyone else is. Shall we, Emily, whilst we're trying to get Emma back from the state of being frozen there.
Apologies. Sorry.
You're frozen. Oh, you're back. Welcome back.
Sorry, hopefully you didn't miss too much.
You were just getting into the interesting stuff. So maybe whatever you said in the last minute, you could sort of reiterate, because
where did you lose
me? We were talking about the sort of, if you like, the strategy of a group doing the agent building and everyone being able to build their own agents. And you'd mentioned there was a mix there,
yes,
and then
exactly.
you'd sort of gone on from there, from the need to have a subject matter expert working with a partner in doing that. And that was about where you've frozen up.
Exactly. Well, I think that was the most useful thing I said. So probably the rest was waffle. So it sounds good. Maybe the internet just said that's enough.
Well, maybe an agent came in.
Yeah, maybe it's that Wi-Fi agent.
A Zoom agent.
Better off when she goes
latest
off
feature. So maybe Emily and Katie, can you sort of just add some commentary? What's going on? It's huge in its horizon in terms of agentic AI, and your sort of point of view on some of the things that Emma said on this sort of having a specialist group, the partnering, the being able to do it yourself approach, and just where you see this sort of going over the next couple of years.
Yeah, similar feelings. There's kind of a There's both a top-down and a bottoms-up kind of combination here. I think we've had, just yesterday, I got a 55-page report that had been done in 2 hours that was all looking, it was a complete content audit of a client's site that we're going to be working with. And that was, one guy made the agent. Like, he figured out how to do that and actually guided it to be looking at and focusing in on the things that he felt were the most important. And so it's kind of an interesting tension between the individual makes the agent sometimes, and then is training and sharing that across to the rest of in this case, his craft. But other times we're faced sometimes with a dilemma of like, is there a huge way or is there your way in getting something done? And so is the agent for you or is the agent for the org, and if that makes sense? So like, if different people do the exact same task different ways, that's true, right? That's how humans are, right? And we each have opinions and things. So how much is it about, okay, we're going to raise the bar because we want to have everybody do everything kind of with some kind of consistency. And then there's a different tension of like, but maybe somebody's got like a really rich sense of things. And so how do you actually kind of keep the iteration going, keep the agents sort of not just an agent of one, but then an agent for a team? And how does that keep evolving? And that kind of like governance, I'll be honest, we haven't figured that out. That's like very kind of complicated, advanced kind of analysis stuff. But that's what's starting to sort of present itself, right? Is that we've got like the little bubble, agents bubbling up. We actually have other agents where we're working with MCP servers. It's much more complicated. It's a much broader workflow, and we're coding those as opposed to the sort of like natural language flavor of agents. There's also a much more agentic kind of complexity stuff that we're also building and testing. A lot of it's creative to code conversion is a big focus for us. We're also thinking quite a bit about like product delivery and thinking quite a bit even about our own processes. So growth and sales is a big one where we're doing a lot of optimization.
Yeah, John, I'll just add a little bit to say, if you're trying to do this at an enterprise scale, it is extraordinarily complex and risky. Once you start to understand that that agents can and only should have access to certain types of information, now you have to consider things like authentication. You have to think about creating on and off buttons for agents. Imagine if there's an agent that does automatic check payments, and now it's writing checks to the wrong people. That is a is a horror story in the making. And then, how do you choose which LLM that the agent is going to operate under? Under certain circumstances, you would want to use fairly lightweight ones because there are cost implications associated with choosing the right or the wrong LLM to guide the discussions or the decisions. And then, agent to agent protocols are still in its early days. Now, the good thing is these are real meaningful problems that all of the big infrastructure providers are actively involved in, and the rate of innovation, we just have to 10x our imaginations because it is happening so much faster. But to be able to go in and build really useful agents, and specifically agent-to-agent infrastructure, is still extraordinarily difficult and extraordinarily risky. And so it takes prudence and risk mitigation to do that in smart and meaningful ways, especially if you're concerned about data landing up in the wrong inference in the wrong LLM and exposed to that.
Thanks for that, Quentin. Those are some great points there, I think, and some things people, when they talk about this stuff, sort of gloss over quite glibly, and they're important issues to consider. Katie, just in terms of Horizon, what sort of things are going on there in terms of agentic AI and what you're playing around with, what's already in place, and so on?
Yeah, I think our motto for the past couple months at this point has been, if not years, has been train, provide access, and drive curiosity. Because, you know, to Emma's point, the domain expert could have these ideas of like, well, what if it was this way? Why do I have to do it this way? That takes me too long. There's too much data. I don't know how to crunch those numbers. And so what we've done is trained folks on how to use everything, you know, understand how to talk to the agents, understand what is agentic and how is it evolving our landscape. But also, once they get access, we're kind of driving that curiosity. And I can think of like roughly 3 people to date in the organization in the past month whose jobs have shifted from a strategy role into kind of this agentic solution-oriented role, where once these teams have access, they could say, what if I had something that just did this for me? But then because they're not technical or they're not the builder, that's where the conversation has stopped in the past. And so AI is awesome, but I can't really, you know, transform it the way I want. So they give up. With these people in these new roles, they now have someone who can say, yeah, great, let's build this agent. It will do X. You're the domain expert. We'll work together on it. And then because they're more enterprise-wide, they can say that use case actually extends in all these different compatible modes. So let's take that agent now and create something that's much wider than that's one instance that sparked the idea. So I think that accessibility piece to allow someone with an idea to get to the technical output has been really great. And we've seen a lot of really cool work coming out of that.
So thanks very much for that, Katie. So we're getting towards the end. Just before we open up to some sort of audience Q&A, can you maybe just each of you comment on, if we were to get back together in 2 years' time here, what you see the industry looking like, the agency industry, the ecosystem, something in the meantime in terms of a technology, AI development that maybe isn't that well known yet, that you also see as playing a part in transformation, and any other sort of trend. Quentin mentioned commerce media, for example, earlier, that is also playing into how the industry is changing and how it'll make it different in a couple of years' time, and even more so 5 years from now. And what it means for the people, because I think that's a big part of this. It's just technology, it's people and culture, and so you can comment on that, the type of people, the skills, and so on. Could we start off maybe with Emily?
Yeah, this is the most dangerous question you've asked, John, because we're all guaranteed to get it wrong, right? But
maybe between all of you.
Exactly. Maybe there's a collective intelligence here that we can tap into. Yeah, I mean, I think I personally am so excited about how our offering is changing. And in 2 years' time, just don't think we'll be delivering the same things we were delivering. A great example of that is kind of sparked by some of the recent headlines from OpenAI, where they're really poised to become a bit of a super app of sorts. At least they're trying, and it's been tried before. Facebook wanted that, you know, there's been attempts in the past, but there's something really intriguing about adoption rates. So when I think about what ecosystem are we all serving, I think that is changing under our feet in real time. I don't think it's fully changed yet. Like, it's not the moment to panic, but it is the moment to evolve and transform in a pretty rapid way. So I imagine in 2 years, it isn't to say that we wouldn't have websites or media. I actually think we would have both of those. But I think our way of accessing humans is really, you know, shifting dramatically, excitedly. Your question was, of course, somewhat about our employees and how we're thinking about augmenting them. But I think that's where it's that curiosity and a capacity for change. You know, that's the most important thing, is that we can, because in the end, we don't have employees if we don't have the business, the reason to exist. And so I think that's, you know, I'd love in 2 years to come back and say we nailed it. But I imagine we'll still be striving. You know, it'll still be a complex. That was my non-answer answer.
No, that's a great answer. Thanks very much for that, Emily. Emma, and then maybe Katie, and then again Quentin, if you can sort of come in with a sort of broader overview of client experiences and so on.
Yeah, precise prediction is a fool's game in the current environment. We will definitely all be wrong. I would say, despite that, perhaps being a fool, 3 things. One, the ecosystem will definitely, in a couple of years' time, include a lot of purely or primarily AI-based startups and new players. There is a set of experts, often actually in the creator influencer space, who I think are going to become critical players in our industry. That'll be one. 2, I think within a year, actually, or certainly within 2 years, it's already happening. We will be structuring our business to market not just to people, but to market to machines. We will be marketing to the LLMs. We should have talked more about, we mentioned, I think it was Emily mentioned Geo. We understanding how your visibility with all the major foundational models and LLMs and optimizing that visibility and that perception is going to become utterly central. It already is. And it was mind-blowing to see the Grok move 2 days ago, 3 days ago, whatever, because that is essentially, I don't know, will it get copied, will it get scaled up? But that's essentially wiping out the old model of how content is served and saying all the old heuristics, all the old markers. It's not evolving the algorithm, it's saying take the algorithm away, AI is going to decide what content gets served. If that gets replicated, that means vast amounts of marketing is going to be all about just, you just need to know how your content is seen by Grok and is liked or not liked by Grok, because that, and you, as I say, imagine that replicated across other social ecosystems. So anyway, I think it's, one, there'll be lots of small AI first players, not necessarily small, but new. 2, we'll be marketing to machines. And 3, there will be an industry of change management. We all, chuck this word out. Oh, yeah, you have to be ready for change, mindset of change, all that sort of stuff. I'm a strategist by background, so I read a lot of behavioral economics. Humans are biologically wired to hate change. We do not like it. You have to literally come out of your automated decision-making process to consciously do it. So that means every organization, we can all say it, I say it, it's hard. It's really, really hard. So we've always had transformation and change management, all that stuff as a thing that has to get done. But being able to actually do it, I think that'll be a sector in itself.
Easier said than done.
Oh my God, totally. We're all humans, can't we feel it in ourselves? I'm right in the middle of this stuff. I still can feel that drag factor in my own reactions.
Katie?
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think when, in 2 years from now, I think what Emily said at the start of the call, we've got to look at the way we talk to people differently. That's really part of like the whole change that we're thinking about when we're talking to our clients. We're going to be marketing to machines, and that's a whole nother world that we have to think about. And agentic commerce is something that I've been really interested in of marketing to an agent who's buying on behalf of someone is going to be a wild new world. I think when the panic sets in and I'm worried about the jobs of the people in my organization, it comes to, we've seen evolution over and over, and every single time we were told this was going to reduce jobs, and ultimately it changes those. And I think as long as people are curious, we can continue to evolve people's jobs and skill sets. And so that's when I get that fear-based little gremlin in the back that tells me I'm going to be replaced by a robot. I have to remember, I've heard that before.
Right. Quentin, your thoughts?
I hope I can end on an optimistic note. Look, the first thing I would say is the majority of the business value in AI has been captured on the B2B side thus far. I'm curious to see how this evolves over the next 2 years. Of the top 50 apps downloaded today, I think it's 2 or 3 of them that are really AI at the core. But if AI is to become the core of all our consumer apps, who is going to be the company that builds the WhatsApp on AI, that builds the Netflix on AI, and so I think there's a tremendous amount of innovation and consumer behavior and consumer value that's going to be created over the next 2 years. As far as the agency and the agency ecosystem is concerned, I think it's going to be a challenging time, and there certainly will be winners and losers in this. But if everybody can build an agent, what is the role of the agency now? Is it the agent of agent? Is it the people that I go to for my demand ideas and I execute everything myself? And what is the right business model associated with that? And so I'm excited to see and to partner with folks across the value chain that are going to reimagine what those value propositions ought to be.
So we just reached the top of the hour. If you've got a few minutes, there were a couple of questions that came in. One, I think actually you just answered, Quentin, because it was to do with winners and losers. There's a question about LLMs, and we haven't sort of dug in on LLMs, and there's a lot of talk about the emergence of sort of domain-specific, task-specific LLMs, and there's also been the ongoing conversation that LLMs make mistakes, kind of like people make mistakes. But what, in terms of what you've each done over the last couple of years at your organizations, what has your experience been there with just the learning how to use LLMs most productively to realize where some of their weaknesses are, build on their strengths, and just where you see that developing in terms of this sort of domain specific, task specific, and what you're doing to build your own LLMs, if you like, and how you're going about doing that?
I just like to say and remind people, today is the worst version of LLMs we'll ever use, right? Every day from here on, it gets better. And the amount of innovation that we see is, people throw around the word unprecedented, but we now go from, annual and 6-month cycles to days and weeks in terms of the innovation. And so I think we're still in the early days of understanding it, and dutifully with the right level of risk of understanding the complexities of, if you're training these LLM, who gets rights and attribution, who should get payment associated with that. And those are meaningful and substantive dialogues that we need to be able to go and have. But even in the experience that we've had in terms of creating custom sources of inputs for these LLMs, and kind of training protocols with synthetic data and human observed behavior and adjustments, you can radically reduce the amount of error and hallucination if you go smartly about this. And the good news is, I guess, is that process is getting easier by the day.
Emma or Emily, either of you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, we're not in the business of building LLMs. I really wouldn't recommend that anyone be in the business of, other than the giants currently in play, or even actually so much training them. As I say, our strategy is about being the application layer that aggregates multiple LLMs and gives a brand safe and indeed brand trained, training isn't the right word actually, because we have a no train policy, but a brand safe and brand specific interface that allows brands to use all these major LLMs. I think that's the most sensible way to go. And in terms of the the hallucinations and the fails, yeah, I mean, that's why I think with a few rare exceptions, there's always going to be a human in the loop. There should always be a human in the loop. Agents can even do quality control and checking and everything. But at the end of the day, for the big complicated things, there's going to be humans in the loop, and there needs to be. But to Quentin's point, yeah, today's the worst ever is ever going to be. It is astonishing that I used to say that month to month, it's sort of becoming the week to week moves forward in capability. Yeah, it's just mind blowing. So I honestly, I just think I almost think it's a bit of a decoy to worry about the hallucinations and the trip ups, because the magic that keeps on coming is like just ridiculous, totally ridiculous. I mean, world building next, it's unbelievable.
Emily?
Yeah, it's an interesting space. I mean, from a personal perspective, when I use these tools, I'm always looking out for numbers to be wrong. I just find numbers is where it has some real challenges. If it's doing its own dynamic math, I want to see the work. So that's just sort of the practical place I'm in this moment. But I also think as we do solutions using these, I think we might also be a little the best solutions are hybrid, meaning we don't have to make generative AI do all the things. We still, I think, benefit from deterministic steps in our processes. And really, if this, then that, like classic kind of, like, I don't think all previous methods go away. And so that's where, we built something. I mentioned the Olympics work we did. We needed to display programming times. We made a decision very early on. We are never going to let the LLM, quote unquote, generate the programming times, because it doesn't make any sense to. It's just a JSON query lookup. But the one writing the JSON query is the LLM. And that's the cool part, right? And so to put pieces together. And so that's where I think we can, at least for the moment, Band-Aid some of the hallucination issues. But at an employee level, we also just last week, we were talking about our training, and we said we need at least, as like a habit, a page at the end of our training, any module, that is always cautioning where the weaknesses might sit still, because we can get so excited, and it is magic. The 0 to 1 is magic. The 1 to 99 is flawed still, right? Like, and so making sure we're still eyes open. So that was like 3 answers in one, all over the place. But that's what all
great.
of the responses got me thinking about over here.
Katie?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I'm not the most technical, but I work closely with the product team on how do we consistently provide the training of the tools and agents and LLMs that we're building based off the data. And to everyone's point, like, the human element does still have to be a component within all of this. And I think in marketing, the way human behavior changes is not going to always be something that's immediately picked up, and that retraining and rethinking is always going to be something that we have to keep an eye on. And I think even when you think outside of marketing, like the AI and what it's, data and collection of data is something that as an industry, I think we have to be mindful of what we're empowering and how are we regulating ourselves and what we're doing. And so, I think we should all be testing and mindful, but curious enough to continue to use the tools and help with the hallucinations and the flaws.
Quentin, any sort of final thoughts?
I think we've covered it all.
So I just filled one question from the audience. I think that we covered a couple of questions that were answered, but we got one question here, and then we'll sort of end the session and so on. So got a question here. OpenAI announced recently that they want access to all of our search history. How will customers and users be in control of their data in the future? What are the implications of this omnipresence AI having access to everything all the time? So I guess this is begs to who owns what data, the user's position in this, our trust of some of the AI companies out there in their use of the data, and so on. So just any final thoughts on that, and then we'll sort of round up the session.
Yeah, so I'll maybe start and say, it needs to be a value exchange. And I believe that we're at the point now where consumers are smart enough that they want to have a little bit more fidelity and control over access rights and things like that. I certainly would want to have the right type of agent curate content and recommendations and things for me, but I'm a little bit more reluctant in opening all of my search history for all and sundry, because I just don't know what value I'm likely to get and what the trade-offs are. And so I'm hoping in the next 2 years from now, we'll make meaningful advances there in terms of giving consumers a little bit more control over the usage rights based on the anticipated value and value exchange that we're likely to get.
Thank you. Emma, Emily, Katie, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'd just add, I mean, history would suggest that everybody protests about not wanting big companies to have access to their data, but it does very little to actually act on that protest. So yeah, to the point about value exchange, I think if the services you're getting are useful enough, everyone will sort of swallow their principles. And I think that might even apply at the company level to some degree. But yeah, at a B2B level, I think it's a much higher dialogue, and certainly all the clients I work with would be up in arms about the idea of having to trade utility for their corporate first-party data.
I agree.
Emily?
I think the minute you offer convenience, it's really hard for people to turn it down. And I'm not sure you can opt out of Gen AI at all anymore, like as a human and as an employee. And since you can't opt out, that's a lot of leverage, right? Like if you are going to be, like if we make it up, right? With Gen AI, you're like 30% more efficient, more insightful, more whatever. If we think of it as this augmentative tool, you can't get a job without it. And then suddenly it becomes really tricky, I think, to like, what does that data exchange mean? Who do we trust? Even if we're going to kind of put forward sort of a data product that then acts as an intermediary, who makes that? And is the market, who's paying? There's so many questions that come. That's its own webinar, I think, and it should probably be a 90-minute one, because that just unlocks so many other considerations. Sometimes the blockchain pops into my head and I think, is this when blockchain suddenly comes back, but yeah, it's a big topic. It's complicated.
Maybe we can do that as our next one, invite you all back for that one. Katie, any thoughts from your side, and particularly maybe in terms of what Horizon is doing in terms of the data infrastructure and how you're applying data and identity data in your business?
Yeah, we have obviously roles that are just compliance. So working with our legal teams, I've had more conversations with client legal teams in the past 2 years than I think I ever have in my whole career. So making sure that the data that we are using is collected and compliant, and there's federal laws, but there's also in the US state laws, and so it's different all the time. And so we're staying on top of that as much as possible. Emily made a good point. That's where my head was going with the blockchain. I remember articles about blockchain becoming the control of your health data. And so could that be the way that you control the information around your, around HIPAA compliancy? And is that what our agents do for us in the future? They decide how our data is collected, shared, distributed, but protected too. So just that's kind of where my head has gone. But the privacy piece is something that I think we have to do and make sure we're self-regulating the industry before it gets out of control.
So a thing there to think about is the combination of maybe agentic AI and blockchain is one thing going forward to keep in mind. So we're about 15 minutes over, so I'd like to thank you all for staying on the extra time. This was so great. There were so many insights here, very valuable. So to
John,
Emily, Emma, Quentin, and Katie there, I'd like to thank you so much. This was excellent, and maybe we can do this again. Meet again soon. Maybe on one of these other topics we talked about. We could have gone on for another hour here. So I'll just hand back to John to sort of cap things off for the session.
I just again, Emma, Quentin, Katie, and Emily, thank you. Thank you for your participation and for your incredible insights. And for you in the audience, if you're not using AI, our suggestion is that you should start and start now, or clearly you're going to get left behind. With that, again, thank you again, goodbye, and we look forward to seeing everyone on the next webinar.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much. It's been fun.
Thank you.